sweetheart. Yeah, I figured that you were having trouble sleeping. Well, I'm awake because I'm having trouble getting to bed. And I could hear you in there moving around and rolling all over the place in that bed. Oh, I could read you a new story. Oh, I guess I didn't tell you, did I? Well, the library does the purge every so often of the books that they have there because they get new books in. And some of them just kind of get deleted out of the system and they get donated. So, your favorite librarian up there decided that she was going to send me with a huge stack of books because she knows that someone loves to have stories read to them. As a matter of fact, I do. Would you like me to read you one of the news stories? Of course. Come on. Come sit down. So, this story is called The Fog's Net by Pflieger. Yeah. Published by the Houghton Mifflin Company. It says, once there was a village by the sea where, when the fog drifted in, thick and cold and gray, boats and people would disappear. The mist is hungry, the villagers would say. It has cast its nets for food. Devora the weaver knew the truth of it. For one morning, walking by the cold, dark sea, she found a torn piece of net. It was strong and tightly knotted, but it was gray and cold and wet, and it slid through her fingers as if it were a cloud. Devora lived in a cottage on the cliffs with her brother, Jereme, and their baby sister, Christabel. They lived alone, for their parents had gone fishing one day and vanished in the fog. Jereme caught fish and dug clams and picked fat berries for them to eat. Sometimes he worked on the little boats of fishermen. Christabel laughed at Jereme's funny faces and played with the brass bell that swung from the hood of her cradle. Devora spun fine yarn and wove it into coverlets and cloaks and yards of soft cloth. And like her mother before her, she made nets for the fishermen. Yeah, I know. That has to be kind of scary for them, right? Just all alone. Still children. But sadly, it does happen, baby. Late one night, she was weaving a bride's coverlet and singing softly to herself when there was a rattle of the latch and a whisper at the door. When Devora opened it, she found nothing outside but the night and the fog. "Who is it?" she called softly. There was a stillness, and then a whisper. "Devora, I need a net woven." Devora thought she knew who it was, but still she said, "Come in and sit by the fire where it's warm." "No, Devora," said the whisper from the fog. "Weave for me, weaver. I would that my net were larger and stronger. Weave for me." I have brought you the twine." And sure enough, a bobbin of twine lay at the doorstep, thick and gray. Devora thought for a moment, for she knew it was the fog she'd talked to, not some fisherman. "Fog," she said, "I'll not weave for you." And the fog answered, "Then I will weave. I will weave a shroud of mist for you and yours to wander in. You will lose your dream in it. And if I cannot have my net, at least I will have your brother." Devora's heart wept at the thought of those who would lose family if she made the net. But she had no choice, for she'd lose Jareem if she did not. "And if I weave, what shall my payment be?" she asked the fog. "I'll not touch you, nor yours, nor any that you favor," said the fog. And so Devora made the bargain. That night she hardly rested, for she was thinking and planning. The next day she began to weave with the thick twine that the fog had given her. Awful stuff it was to work with, for it was cold and slippery as a cloud. But bit by bit, Devora made a net that hung gray and wet, light as the mist, but strong. She took no joy in its making, and neither did Christabel, for Devora took the bell from her cradle to tie into a corner. The night the net was finished, Devora stepped outside the cottage and found the fog waiting for her. An end of its net crumpled on the doorstep. With sure fingers, Devora attached the new section to the old. "You have done well, Devora," said the fog. "You and yours are safe." But Devora went back into the cottage with a sad heart, for she knew that others would be caught in the fog's great net. And caught they were, for the very next day the mist crept in, and that evening Jareem did not come home. Devora had sent him out with some fishermen, hoping that if the fog would not touch any she loved, then it would not touch those Jareem was with. But now she stood on the cliff and wept, for the fog had not kept its bargain. I know that is really sad, but I have a feeling that this book is trying to teach us something. She bundled Christabel close and warm and snuggled her into a basket. Christabel's laugh was the only bright thing in the fog as Devora carried her down to the beach to Jareem's little boat. Onto the water in the tiny boat she went, with Christabel, chattering while Devora rowed out onto the sea. The fog swallowed them. It was like rowing through a cloud. She could not tell where they were going, but she rowed and she rowed and she listened and she listened until she heard a tiny golden sound. The sound of a brass bell bobbing on the water. Christabel's bell jingled by the waves. She rowed and she rowed until she found the little bell tied to the corner of the net that she had made. She untied the bell and returned it to Christabel. The net she hooked onto the boat so it trailed behind as she rowed, finding her way back toward shore. The rowing out was long, but the rowing home seemed longer. The net itself was not heavy as it trailed behind the boat, but what it held was heavy as stones. I don't know. At last, she heard the slush of waves on the beach and knew she was home. She landed the boat and hauled it into shore. Devora was weary from rowing, but her task was not yet done. On the beach, she built a fire of driftwood and whatever she could find to burn. She built the fire as high and as hot as she could, for what she needed to burn was wet. Devora unhooked the net from the boat and began to pull and walk with it, dragging it up on the beach. The net was heavy, and it stretched out and vanished into the foggy sea. But desperation made her strong. Bit by bit, the net came onto the beach. Devora dragged the corner to the fire and put it there to burn. Then she walked down to the water's edge to haul in another section of the great net that dripped water and seaweed. Another section to burn, and then down to the water for more. It was exhausting. She was afraid she could not finish. Then, from the sea came shouting, fishermen calling to the shore. Devora heard Jereem's voice, and her heart grew light. And from the sea came splashing, fishermen swimming to the shore. And there was Jereem, wet as a seal, hugging her tight. The joyful fishermen took the net from Devora. They knew their work, and they set up a chant to work by as they hauled in the fog's gray net. Other things came with it. Bits of wood to feed the fire, exhausted birds to warm and release, their own small boats, other boats of strangers, terribly empty. People from the village came to see what was burning. Gladly, they joined the fishermen hauling in the net. They gathered more wood to keep the fire high and hot, for the fog's damp net was hard to burn. The net was darker now, an older section, black with age. Still they hauled and burned. The smoke from the net mingled with the fog. Still they hauled and burned. The net was even darker, an even older section. But the fog seemed lighter now, as if the moon were breaking through. From the fog there came a terrible wail. My net! My beautiful net! What are you doing to my beautiful net? Only Devora heard it, for the others were chanting too loudly. She cradled Christopher and shivered. They hauled and burned, hauled and burned. The sky grew lighter and lighter. The net they burned was as black as the bottom of the sea. My net! The fog's wail had fallen to a whisper. What are you doing to my beautiful net? They hauled and burned, hauled and burned. Now something pale came in, flailing and gasping. A cry arose, for it was a stranger, a fisherman from the lands to the north. He crawled onto the shore, and he knelt there, coughing. He was gathered up and taken to the fire to be warmed. Then the net grew narrower, and the net grew lighter. And then they had hauled in all of it, and were burning the last section. The fog had faded, and the moon shone on the rippling sea. The stars danced bright. My net! Devora heard fading into the night sky. The fishermen and the village folk stood around the fire, watching the last of the net burn and looking at the stranger. He stood in the damp clothes that steamed from the heat, and he looked back at them. You and yours have rescued me, he said, and I thank you for it. It was Devora, someone answered, and the stranger looked at her. I thank you, Devora, he said. I thought not to be rescued at all. There is a land where the fog goes, and out beyond the sight of our homes. Bright and warm the land is when the fog is off hunting, but cold and dark when the fog is at home. There I've lived with others captured by the fog. We weep for our homes and for those we have left on these far shores. Today, when I saw that the net was being pulled this way, I took my heart in my hands and leapt into the net, with a piece of wood to carry me. I hoped it would take me home. Now that the net is gone, I can guide you back. We can sail there and bring the others home to those they weep for. Around the fire, shouts were raised, and around the fire, plans were made. Devora cradled Christabel and laughed to think of their parents coming home. She looked often at the handsome stranger standing in the firelight, and he looked back at her. The next day, the villagers sailed with the stranger to the island beyond all sight of home and fetched back those that they had lost to the fog. Now, Devora and Jereen and Christabel lived happily with their parents in the cottage by the sea. Soon Devora was weaving coverlets for her wedding to the fisherman from the far north. Strangely enough, the fog stayed away from the village. Oh, sometimes there was a bit of mist, a wisp that the sun soon melted. But the fog, thick as a cloud, did not return, and all that remained of it was a story that people told around the fire on cold winter nights. Yeah, that was a very different story, but I'm glad you liked it. Now, it is getting really late, and a certain someone should be in bed fast asleep. So, yeah, it's time, sweetheart. I'm glad you enjoyed the story, but it's time to go to sleep. I love you, baby. Good night.